Only Murders in the Building is back this week with episode 5 of season 4, and this was the shortest episode that we've had all season. Sitting at around 30 minutes, this one focused on the night that Sazz was killed and trying to get to the bottom of how the killing actually took place, which they hoped would lead to the who, rather than the why. And it's safe to say that the trio made progress and they felt like they were a step closer, with a climactic ending occurring where a gunshot went off and somebody saying they've been hit. Has another murder taken place? But also, outside of that, I feel like there's a brand new suspect in the firing line, and there was a small moment in the episode that made me theorize about that. So let's dive into this episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 5, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The Ending Explained. The ending of this episode was centered around the epiphany that Charles had about the fact that there could well have been 2 people involved in the murder, and not just one. This was kind of in front of our eyes throughout the whole final act, with the subtle hint of there being several versions of the main characters and the mirrors making even more of them. And also the fact that the movie was being directed by the brothers-sisters, Trina and Tawny, 2 individuals that look very similar. We found out that the killing and disposing of Sazz's body took place within a 12-minute window, as Bev received a phone call at 11:07 where Sazz wanted to reach out and tell her about something that was going on with the Only Murders movie that she'd recently greenlit, but Bev didn't answer because she was fearful that it would jeopardize the project. We know that Sazz was out in LA as she had a ticket on her desk where it showed that she was flying into JFK, and she also met up with Loretta, who was working on a project out there, as they were following each other on social media. So it seems like there could have been some kind of discovery that she made whilst she was there, and that could have been the sensitive thing that she wanted to tell Charles about but never did. There's been a lot of focus on Oliver being paranoid about Loretta and this mystery arm that's been wrapped around her in a photo, and in this episode it was revealed to be Jack Jonk, somebody that was extremely athletic, strong, popular and attractive, something which made Oliver's fears even worse. If the main takeaway of this episode was that there needed to be 2 people involved, what if this Jack Jock was one of them? Could he have been hired muscle or be involved romantically with somebody in the Only Murders movie cast? This is a theory that does have legs, and I will get to that in a moment. Could the person that he's involved with maybe have found out about Sazz having some information that could have jeopardized the production, and because he may have been close with somebody that wanted her taken out, he may have found himself roped into it in some kind of way? If he's close to Loretta, that means he would have access to knowing Charles's address. It feels like this guy has had so much importance placed upon him, but in such a subtle way that he has to be connected, right? This actually wasn't the route that the show went down. Instead, it went down the route of focusing on the shoe print that was found in Dudanov's apartment. With the trio going to the studio and having a hunch that it was somebody in the production, the tacky mats that Ava laid out in order to stop dirt and dust from entering her space were used as a way of looking at whose shoe it could be. It turned out that it was one of the brothers' sisters who had the print that matched. This doubling up meant that the sisters could have been involved. Trina and Tawny have different builds, and it was positioned as one being the shooter from the distance and the other one being the muscle that moved the body down to the incinerator as they were stronger, as was shown by her picking up Oliver and moving him with ease. Them being the directors of the movie is something which does give them great motive for them to take out Sazz, the person that had the potential of ruining a project that was going to be a huge success for them. There was a moment in the episode where the sisters had this large box between them, and it felt like the show was trying to insinuate that there could have been a rifle in there, but it does just feel a bit too in our faces to be the case. The final thing that we saw in the episode was a gunshot going off and it cutting to black. Somebody said they've been hit, which I don't think will actually be the case. The fact that all of the people are standing in front of mirrors, I think if a gun has been fired, it's probably going to have hit one of the mirrors and not an actual person. It was mentioned that the whole concept of the photo shoot was multiplying, and the bullet not hitting a person but a reflection is something I could imagine the show doing. Marshall was also an individual that we learned a lot about in this episode, and he had imposter syndrome, something that Mabel was also going through as she had a lack of direction in her life. Marshall was an extremely awkward individual and changed his appearance in order to fit in. He had a fake beard, wore glasses, and was trying to look like the writer Charlie Kaufman, something which I think could be telling of the direction of the overall story in this season. Charlie Kaufman is well known for writing the movie Adaptation, which is the same title of this episode. Within that movie, a character, the writer Charlie Kaufman, was hired to write the screenplay adaptation of Orlean's book, The Orchid Thief, but he struggled to do so because he had writer's block, and he also had anxiety and was socially awkward. So when looking to get more inspiration, Charlie and his brother Donald essentially found the author, and they realized that there was a suspicious edge when they met her, and that she had a secret lover. From there, Orlean's lover ended up shooting Donald because the brothers were going to uncover a dark secret, and this ultimately led to his death and Orlean being arrested. The thing that's getting me about this whole thing is the lover connection, and the idea that there is a dark secret. Could Jack Jonk be romantically involved in some way with somebody in the crew or cast? Sazz knew a secret and she ended up dead, so could this season of the show potentially be mirroring the plot to the movie Adaptation? A new suspect. Is Glen involved? One small detail that popped into my head during this episode was the fact that Glenn Stubbins, the Ben Glenroy stunt double, randomly appeared outside of Charles' apartment. When we saw the trio meet Glenn in the previous episode, they were in the bar that all of the stunt people went to, and the last we saw, he was in the back room with Dr. Maggie. So not at one point should he have known where Charles lived. I feel like this could be the show just subtly dropping him there because he could well be one half of the potential two suspects that could be involved. When looking back at the previous seasons of the show, Ben and Charles never really had a good relationship with one another. In fact, they'd argue on set and there was even physical violence involved between the pair. What if, with Ben dying and it not being known 100% who the killer was for the longest amount of time, it obviously put Glenn out of a job? And he may have thought Charles could have been responsible, especially because of the fact that Ben and Charles didn't get on, and that's why he could have had a motive to take out Charles. This could then originally connect back to the fact that Charles was the intended victim and that it wasn't necessarily supposed to be Sazz. Glenn could have found himself in a situation where he needed cheap rent, which could have led him to the West Tower in the room in question. Each week there's a new theory that ends up floating around about who it could be, and this is one that this episode produced for me this time round. I think there's definitely a plausible element to it just has to be explored a little bit more. So I'm not closing this one off completely yet. My review of the episode. I thought this was just an okay episode of the show. I don't think it was the best of the season by any means. However, it did have some really strong moments throughout it. For example, I liked the cinematic reenactment of how the killer could have gotten across the street in 12 minutes that Charles was featured in, and I also thought Oliver trying to prove that he could do it was humorous too. The one thing that I was a bit disappointed in with this episode was the runtime. It just didn't feel like it was long enough where we could really immerse ourselves within the case and guess what was going on. Like I said earlier, there were a few theories that came out of this week's episode, but no real strong core development, so I think that's a bit of a shame. I actually thought Molly Shannon as Bev in this episode was just a little bit overperformed. I know that some performers really lean into melodrama and accentuate their mannerisms and physical performance in this show, like Oliver for example. But Molly Shannon's delivery just felt a little flat and like she was reading off of the page, which I thought was a bit of a shame. The next episode in the show is titled Blow Up, and the description is extremely vague. Its synopsis is a documentary film is made by the brothers' sisters, so I think we can pretty much expect to go into it blind and see what happens on the day of release. We're now halfway through the season, and as we embark into the final half, I feel the pacing of the show will probably rapidly increase, and I'm hoping more revelations will start to appear. So, there you have it. Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 5, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Only Murders in the Building, then click on the card in the top corner. I've been breaking down the entire season, or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.